back. And it's been a while since we've had a Carriage House reading, so this is our way of stepping back into the arena. Before I say anything else, I just want to say a special thank you to Pat Hoynes for setting everything up for today. Pat works for the borough of Fanwood in a zillion and one capacities, and I'm a techno dunce, so a big thank you, Pat. We wouldn't be here without you. Okay, this year, 2023, marks the 25th year since the Carriage House Poetry Series was established back in 1998. After our COVID-driven hiatus, we're easing back with this reading via Zoom, and I just couldn't think of anyone I'd rather have read for us than Maria Gillan. I've known Maria for almost 40 years, and I didn't realize that until I went back and looked at some of my old records. We met back in the early to mid 1980s, and she published a couple of my poems in her journal then, and asked me to read in the Passaic County Community College series that she was running. And that, believe it or not, was April 12th, 1986. I used to keep a record of all my readings. I don't do that anymore, but I had that one. So April of 1986. But in the years that followed, I've come to know Maria as the one person who's done more for poets and poetry than anyone else I know. She's been an inspiration to me and to how many dozens of other poets, it's hard to even say. I call her New Jersey's First Lady of Poetry. She's also the queen of narrative poetry. So in spite of that, she's internationally known and respected. She's not just a New Jersey poet as such. She's a poet, anthologist, painter, professor, founder and executive director of the Poetry Center at Passaic County Community College, and founding editor of the Patterson Literary Review, which started life under the title Footwork.
Yeah.
The journal in which Maria first published a poem of mine. And I was so proud and excited, but that had to be mid 80s, right, Maria? Early to mid 80s.
It was earlier than that.
Oh, is it? Yeah, I don't even remember,
Yeah.
But I have those old journals somewhere. Among other awards, Maria received the 2014 George Garrett Award for Outstanding Community Service in Literature. That was from AWP. The 2011 Barnes & Noble Writers for Writers Award, that was from Poets and Writers, and the 2008 American Book Award. She's also a recipient of the May Sarton Award, the Faring-Houghton Award, New Jersey State Council on the Arts Fellowships in Poetry, and notice that's plural, more than one fellowship, and the American Literary Translators Association Award through the National Endowment for the Arts. And those are just some of her honors and awards. She's published more than 20 books of and about poetry. And her most recent book is When the Stars Were Visible. Now they tell me that when you hold a book up on Zoom, it's backwards. The writing is backwards. Well, anyway, the title is When the Stars Were Still Visible. And it's on sale today at Amazon for $14.71. And I would urge you all, when we're done with the reading, go to Amazon and order a copy. It's a stunner of a book. I mean, it's just, I love Maria's work in general, but this one is just, I think, her best work yet. So When the Stars Were Still Visible, $14.71 today. So anyway, I'm honored and I'm grateful to introduce to you Maria Gillan. And I'm going to mute myself now if I can.
You did it. Thanks, Adele. I appreciate the introduction. And before I start reading, I'd like to say that Adele has done a fabulous job with the poetry series she runs at the Carriage House at Fanwood. She's been an advocate for poetry. She's been writing and writing, has a huge number of books, I think even more books than I have. And I have really probably more than anybody ever wants to read. And she's an amazing woman. I think she's done a great job with that series. And it's hard to keep things going. As somebody who started my series in 1980, officially started in 1980, actually started earlier than that, but that was the first year that we got a New Jersey State Council on the Arts grant for the series. And so I count that as the first year of the series. Actually, the magazine was started in 1977 by a person who was an adjunct at Passaic County Community College. Don't tell me I'm just George Perenni. And then he left and I took it over in, I think, 1978. And I gradually, Footwork was the name he gave to it, but I gradually made Footwork smaller and smaller and made Patterson Literary Review bigger on the cover until finally I stopped using Footwork completely. Anyway, I've enjoyed doing the magazine. I know that Adele has loved doing her series. And of course, she's always writing, always teaching, always making a new place for herself in poetry. And I think she deserves a thumbs up. I hate that we can't clap because you can't hear the clapping. But anyway, I'm going to start with a poem that probably already all of you have heard. I don't know, but Adele made a special request for this poem. And I have to say that I try to read this as more often as I can. I still feel guilty about this, although it happened when I was 17 years old, and I'm certainly not 17 years old now. Daddy, we called you Daddy when we talked to each other in the street, pulling on our American faces, shaping our lives in Patterson slang. Inside our house, we spoke a Southern Italian dialect mixed with English. We called you Papa. But outside again, you became Daddy, and we spoke of you to our friends as my father. Imagining we were speaking of that father knows best TV character in his dark business suit, carrying his briefcase into his house, retreating into his paneled den, his big living room and dining room, his frilly aproned wife who greeted him at the door with a kiss. Such space and silence in that house. We lived in one big room, living room, dining room, kitchen, bedroom, all in one, dominated by the great oak dining table around which we sat, talking and laughing, listening to your stories, your political arguments with your friends. Papa, how you glowed in company light, happy when the other immigrants came to you for help with their taxes or legal papers. It was only outside that glowing circle that I denied you. Denied your long hours as night watchman at Royal Machine Shop. One night, riding home from a date, my middle-class American boyfriend kissed me at the light. I looked up and met your eyes as you stood at the corner near Royal Machine. It was nearly midnight, January, cold and windy. You were waiting for the bus, the street light illuminating your face. I pretended I did not see you. Let my boyfriend pull away, leaving you on the empty corner, waiting for the bus to take you home. You never mentioned it, never said that you knew how often I lied about what you did for a living, or that I was ashamed to have my boyfriend see you, find out about your second shift work, your broken English. Today, remembering that moment, still illuminated in my mind by the street lamp's gray light, I think of my own son and the distance between us greater than miles. Papa, silk worker, janitor, night watchman, immigrant Italian. I honor the years you spent in menial work, slipping down the ladder as your body failed you, while your mind so quick and sharp longed to escape. Honor the times you got out of bed after sleeping only an hour to take me to school or pick me up. The warm bakery rolls you bought for me on the way home from the night shift, the letters you wrote to the editors of local newspapers. Papa, silk worker, not janitor, night watchman, immigrant Italian. Better than any father knows best, father, bland as white rice. With your wine press in the cellar, with the newspapers you collected out of garbage piles to turn into money you bank for us, and with your mouse traps, with your cracked and calloused hands, with yellow teeth. Papa, dragging your dead leg through the factories of Patterson. I am outside the house now, shouting your name. Anyway, that's a poem I feel that I owe him. And I'm going to read a couple of other, I've got, I have a lot of books, so I'm going to work my way through the books. And this poem is called, and it's in my collected poems through 2009. Since then, I've written 2,878 poems, no more. After school on ordinary days. After school on ordinary days, we listened to the Shadow or the Lone Ranger as we gathered around the tabletop radio that was always kept on the china cabinet built into the wall in that tenement kitchen. A china cabinet that held no china except thick and white and utilitarian cups and saucers, poor people's cups from the 5 and 10 cent store. My mother always was home from Ferrara's coat factory by the time we walked in the door after school on ordinary days. And she'd give us milk with Bosco in it and cookies she'd made that weekend. The three of us would crowd around the radio, listening to the voices that brought a wider world into that Patterson apartment. Later, we'd have supper at the kitchen table, the house loud with our arguments and laughter. After supper on ordinary days, our homework finished, we'd play Monopoly or gin rummy, the kitchen warmed by the huge coal stove, the wind outside rattling the loose old windows. We inside, tucked in, warm and together on ordinary days that we didn't know until we looked back across a distance of 40 years would glow and shimmer in memory's fading light. Isn't that the way it is? The things that stay in our minds are often things that we don't know we're going to remember with such clarity. I want to read a poem. My son is a lawyer, and he's very conservative. I'm very liberal. So if you put two opposites on the political scale, that would be my son and myself. And so this poem is called What I Can't Face About Someone I Love. That my son loves me, but would prefer not to see me too much. Every Sunday night, when I call him in North Carolina, where he lives with his wife and 2 children, I can hear the heaviness in his voice, his hello tempered with impatience, our conversation stiff and stilted. They always think I can talk to a stone. Strangers in buses and trains tell me their life histories. Acquaintances tell me about their affairs and shattered marriages. Show me the secret undersides of their lives. My graduate students vie for my attention. They want to sit next to me and carry their bags and affect my lunch. But my son can't wait to get off the phone with me. I ask him how the kids are or specific questions about school. Ask about his wife, his job. He answers with 1 or 2 words. They're fine or okay or the same. My son is a lawyer. He was always brilliant with language, at least written language. And he can read a 300-page book in an hour and remember every detail. But with me, he turns mute as a stump. If I ask for help with some legal problem, he will give it. But then I do not hear in his voice the lilt I hear in my daughter's voice when I call her. Instead, I hear reluctance as though his attention were focused on some truly fascinating person, and he can't wait to get off the phone. I tell stories that I hope will amuse him, but finally, after struggling and finding no response, I can't wait to hang up. I say, well, John, have a good week. Give everyone a hug for me. I know my son has divorced me somewhere deep inside himself in a place he doesn't look at. I am too much for him, too loud, too dramatic, too frantic, too emotional. I laugh too much. I wear him out in a minute and a half. If he never saw me again, he wouldn't miss me. And this is what I can't face about someone I love. I have to say that was a very hard poem to write, almost as hard as the poem about, wait a second, I want to make sure I'm keeping to the time. I'm going to read some poems from The Place I Call Home, which is another book of mine. That this one was published by, the first one was published by Gornick Editions. This one was published by New York Quarterly. And it's a poem about my mother, I used to make fun of her because she was 4'11" and I was 5'3", so I thought I was really tall. However, my back is crumbling. So now don't tell anybody, please. I'm now 4'11" myself. And because my whole spine is crumbling into a ball at the bottom of my back. And I'm sure she's up in heaven laughing. Remember when you made fun of me because I was 4'11"? But my mother was a powerhouse. She was the kind of woman who could do anything she made up her mind to do. Even things that seemed impossible, she would do. One time she saw the neighbor who was what is it called? The person who does concrete, whatever. And he was rebuilding his front steps. And she watched him. And then she said, I can do that. And she made my father drive her to the hardware store to buy bags of cement. And they had a wheelbarrow already. And so she bought the cement mix and cinder blocks, and she knocked the front steps down and she rebuilt them. And when she finished, she said, that was easy. It was like icing a cake. Anyway, this is the little general. I'm afraid I'm sort of little general too, I have to admit. Bossy, impossible. My brother called our mother the little general when we were teenagers. My brother driving the car, my mother sitting next to him, her head a small dark knob, barely reaching the top of the seat. My bossy mother who told us how to live our lives. My mother who was always moving. When I remember her, I see her almost as a blur, like the cartoon of the Roadrunner. My mother who washed all the dishes as soon as the last bite of food vanished from the plate. My mother held my doctor brother's foot until he fell asleep when he was still a boy. My mother who sat at the kitchen table with us, always ready to hear the stories of our lives, ready to tell the story of hers. My mother who told me everything that was wrong with me. So I still can hear her voice, though she said she told me for my own good. My mother who loved the feel of the earth on her hands, who smelled the flour and spices, who baked thousands of loaves of bread, cooked innumerable fragrant meals for her children and grandchildren in her basement kitchen. My mother who taught me how to laugh. My mother who could not read or write unless she wanted to go to school. My father wouldn't let her. Women don't need to go to school, he said. Mother who didn't know how much money my father had in the bank and never wrote a check. My mother who wanted to learn how to do everything. My mother who could quote poems she memorized in 3rd grade in Italy before she had to leave school. My mother who drew an imaginary line around us to keep us close. The front troop, our boundary, the family, our country, her little sturdy body, better than a magic charm. My mother whose skin turned orange before she died, or the week before she got sick, she planted a huge garden. Who was sure she was too powerful to die. Even now, 25 years after the funeral procession led us to Calvary Cemetery and to the mausoleum drawer they filed you in. I wish I could drive over to your house and find you there. Your earthy humor, your warm arms that always were the place I call home. I'm bossy in the same way my mother was, and I don't like to admit it, but of course I am. And but my mother was a person we all leaned on. It was hard to admit she was actually dying, and she didn't want to admit she was dying. And until the last few days, my brother's a doctor, so he had her on morphine, but she didn't say anything about being in pain. And until the last couple of days, when she admitted that she was in pain, she was an amazing woman, I think. I don't think I would be so strong. Anyway, I'm going to read a poem about, oh no, I'm not. I think I'll go to, in Japan, the earthquake. And I'll say that when the earthquake and tsunami happened in Japan, it was the same time that my daughter's husband, whom she loved madly and didn't know anything was wrong, told her that he wanted a divorce. So it was like we were hit by a tsunami from him. And then this tsunami was going on in Japan. In Japan, the earthquake. The TV newscaster shows scenes of Japan after the earthquake and tsunami. Flashing across the bottom of the screen, Japanese concerned about the meltdown of a second reactor. The Japanese evacuated the area for 12 miles around the reactor. The air is already contaminated. How easily we break, and what's once broken, how can we be repaired? My daughter, even 8 years after her husband told her he met someone else and wanted a divorce, has not healed. She trusts no one, retreats to the safety of her condo. My daughter is still broken. I wish for her a daughter like the one she's been to me, but even I, the optimist of all optimists, no longer allow myself to believe. In Japan, the nuclear reactor melting, the air contaminated, the evacuated the area for 12 miles. It is already too late. They say they tested people, and although they test positive for radiation, they're not sick yet. I look at the picture in the newspaper of a grandmother with her grandson after the evacuation. She has her arms around him. He leans into her chest. Imagine all the people who will die from radiation, maybe not tomorrow or the next day, but soon. My daughter has been touched by the radiation of her husband's betrayal. She's only one person, and though she is mine, I know the world is full of destruction. The TV announcer says the same thing that happened in Japan could happen here, Indian Point, so close to huge centers of population. We are American. We believe Americans. We believe we are invulnerable. We believe we are safe. We are certain nothing like that can happen to us. The night my daughter's husband told her, I have something to tell you and you're not going to like it. But in the moment before his words hit her like bullets, she did not suspect. He cooked dinner, washed the dishes, hummed under her breath. She thought nothing bad could happen to her. The man she loved in the living room, she in the kitchen humming. The people in Japan were going about their lives while radiation seeped into the ground all around us, around them, and they breathed it in. Isn't that the way it is when there's a disaster, when there's something terrible happens to us in our lives, and we're never really ready for it. The radiation is there, but we don't know it. It's invisible, and then it gets us just when we think it can't possibly get us. I'm going to read a poem from another book called What Blooms in Winter. And I have to say that my husband died in 2010, and it felt like a very long winter after he died. Anyway, this is called Why I Love the Library. And this goes back to childhood, although I still love libraries. And I hate that so many are closing and so many are being attacked. My mother, who never wanted me to leave the front stoop, let me go to the Riverside branch of the Patterson Public Library. Each week, I'd climb the steep hills past the houses larger and much nicer than ours, huge two-family houses with big sun porches. I'd open the door into the library, and it was like stepping into another land, one full of quiet, the soft muted colors of the book covers, well-worn pages. There were hours in the children's section, the chairs the perfect size for me. Christine, the librarian, always welcomed me as though I were an old friend. We spoke Italian at home, and we had a set of encyclopedias my mother bought on time from a door-to-door salesman, a set that my brother read all the way through. But when I was 8, my sister got a book of Grimm's fairy tales for a birthday present. And she, like my brother, was very practical and scientific and interested in fairy tales. I loved that book. And once I'd read it, I wanted more. So I took my mother into allowing me to go to the library and to the magic kingdom where I could spend an hour surrounded by books, choose my books by starting at A, working my way around the shelves. When I was 11, Christine said, okay, now you can move into the adult section. I can still see the sunlight pouring through those large windows, the exquisite stillness of the room, the power that books possess to make me feel warm and safe in the same way a bowl of pasta and chicken soup make me feel comfortable, even today, all these years beyond childhood. And the way I rushed home down the hill, clutching my second book, 7 books for the week, all that treasure I carried in my arms. I swear I was so happy my feet didn't touch the ground. God, I love that library. It was such a safe place. It was such a welcoming place. I'll never forget that librarian as long as I live. And I was 10 or 11, I don't even know if she's alive at this point. Anyway, I'll never forget her because she let me go into the adult section. She really encouraged me. She gave me suggestions of books to read. I mean, really, my parents didn't speak English and they didn't know books in English. And there was nobody really to say, read this or read that. My brother became a doctor and my sister became a nurse. And neither one of them was really interested in, how sometimes scientific people are not really so interested in things that are fiction. And so for me, to have that librarian take an interest in me was a major thing. But to be able to sit in that sunlit room, surrounded by the books I loved, was so wonderful. Anyway, this poem is called The Lace Tablecloth and the Patterns of Memory. My mother came from Italy, and she brought with her a trunk full of linens she'd embroidered or appliqued. She had crocheted lace she had crocheted in tablecloths and dresser scarves. My mother packed them in a large metal trunk, and each year she added sheets she wore with pennies saved from her 25 cents an hour job in the factories of Patterson. I used the tablecloths and linens all the years of our marriage when we had company or on holidays, and after we'd eaten, my mother would take them home and bring them back white and starched. In 2010, my mother died 22 years ago, my husband in 2010. Because today I opened the drawer where I keep the lace tablecloths and linens and see my husband and me as a young couple. My husband, handsome with his high cheekbones and gray eyes. My mother, father, and sister still alive and vibrant. Our children and our nieces and nephews all there. I see in the lace pattern, the pattern of our lives, the way it winds in and out, connecting all that came before, love and marriage and grief woven into the threads. And I know that all the people I have loved are tucked away carefully in my mind so that I can lift them out and remember and be comforted. What else can we ask for? But that we keep people alive in our hearts, in our minds, in our memories. And it's such a wonderful thing. Okay, now this is my latest book, When Stars Were Still Visible, and I'm going to read a few poems from that. And let me see, I'm going to start with a poem. I so wanted to be American. I think I married my husband because he looked so American, and his family lived in a white colonial house. I mean, I still lived in a tenement. He lived in a white colonial house, and his parents were educated people, and it was a totally different world from anything I'd ever seen. And I really was not so familiar with some of the foods they ate. And anyway, I wanted to be American. I thought that by marrying I swear, some stupid part of myself thought that by marrying my husband, I would automatically become American and be acceptable to people. What a dope. Meatloaf and hamburger helper. Growing up, my mother cooked macaroni and gravy, meatballs and brajol, spinach, lentil soup, roasted chicken, potatoes, made zeppoli, big salads fresh from the garden, zucchini with rosemary. Meals so delicious I can still taste them. When my children were growing up, my mother-in-law taught me to make American food that my husband liked because he grew up on it. So I learned how to make pot roasts and leg of lamb and stew and roast beef. She taught me how to make meatloaf, which was cheap and could be used for one meal, plus sandwiches. She taught me to make meals with hamburger helper, which my mother called that junk. Years later, my stomach turns at the thought of hamburger helper, the greasy feel of it, the fake chemicals taste of sauce and spices, flavor created in a lab. But when I served those meals, so different from anything my mother ever cooked, I felt I had arrived in middle-class America, that I now belonged in the land that almost guaranteed you died from a heart attack before you could reach old age, and not the land of my father, too poor to buy all that meat, even if he had wanted to. My father, who died at 92, sitting in the sun in his garden, the aroma of tomatoes and peppers and zucchini perfuming the air around him. I think one day I'm just going to do a whole book just on him and on his vision of life and what we owed to the world and how we couldn't just live for ourselves. And we had to make a space for other people. I also want to read a poem. I read a very negative poem about my son before, and so I feel I have to read this poem. I will say that I was getting ready to go up to Binghamton to teach, and I used to teach at Binghamton. They did a special thing for me. They let me teach poetry intensives all weekend, from 10 o'clock in the morning on Saturday to 6 at night, and then 10 to 3 on Sunday, 3 times a year. And so I was getting ready to do that. And I was in my upstairs hall and I had gotten out of bed and I don't know what happened, a quirk in my brain. And I suddenly speeded up. Don't ask me. I don't know what happened. And I went flying. I went faster than I've ever gone since I was 15. And I flew across the room and fell into my daughter's bedroom and broke my nose. And I was surrounded by blood. And I love mystery stories. I've always loved mystery stories. I've always read a lot of mysteries. But what I didn't realize is that a murderer would slide in all that blood. There wouldn't be any way for him to not slide in. And what I discovered when I broke my nose, I'm on the hardwood floor and I'm sliding. And the blood is not something you could stand on. So I keep sliding. I finally crawl into the bathroom and pull myself up on the sink. And then I went downstairs, trailing blood all the way. And then when I got downstairs, I called 911 and they came and the police came and then they took me to the hospital. And when I got to Binghamton, I spoke to my son. And he's used to me being the total optimist. I could have 3 broken arms. I'd still be optimistic if I had 3 arms. And so I was very down about this. My face, I looked like an eggplant. And my nose was broken. I mean, I just thought, oh my God, I'm done for. And he said, I can't believe you're being negative. You're depressed. I can't believe it. You can't believe you be negative. So here's what he did. My son, the lawyer, quotes Dylan Thomas to give me courage. After I lose my balance and fall, smashing my nose against the hardwood floor, I slip in a huge puddle of blood, try to stand up, my feet keep sliding. I've always loved mystery stories, read about people stabbed to death, never thought about the blood, how the murderer could break his neck sliding in it. After the hospital, after the x-rays, after the EKG, the 4-hour drive to Binghamton, after I teach my class looking battle-scarred, I think of my son who used to tell me I should cut back and give up poetry, proving that he didn't understand anything about me. When I talk to him on the phone, he is shocked to hear defeat in my voice. I am optimistic about everything, even in the middle of calamity. But today I am brought low by the recognition of my own frailty. When my son, the lawyer, the practical, pragmatic one, how many women your age have a life they love, work they love doing? Later, he sends me a quote from Dylan Thomas: "Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage against the dying light." I repeat the lines over and over to myself, grateful to the son I was sure didn't understand anything about me. And I have to say, I've been very fortunate in my children. You don't know what you get. Sometimes you get lemons. I got children who are definitely not lemons. I always thought they were absolutely wonderful. Of course, my daughter says I exaggerate, but I don't think I really do exaggerate. So wait a minute, I'm going to find another. Oh, this poem is about my daughter when she was young. I hate going in stores. I hate stores. I'm totally uninterested in fashion. I'm just not something that I'm going to spend a lot of time. Maybe I did more when I was a size 7, but now I don't care. But this is called going shopping. I used to go shopping with my daughter when she was a teenager. I hate stores, hate shopping. Everything takes time. I get bored. But I went shopping with my daughter because she wanted me to go. I loved watching her try on clothes, loved seeing how beautiful she looked, marveled at the perfect bones of her face. What I did not know about shopping could have filled the Garden State Plaza Mall, but I could not deny her anything. We'd get inside a dressing room and all my common sense would fly out the door. I'd say yes to everything, as though I could make up to this child who still lives inside me for all the clothes I could not afford to buy when I was young, as she is now. I wanted to give her the life I never had, an upper middle class life tucked into a silver box with a silver ribbon. Looking back, I remember how happy I was to watch her try on the clothes we bought, how happy that she looked nothing like me. I had yet to learn that all her beauty and grace could not protect her from what waited for her outside the circle I had drawn around her. I think my mother tried to draw a circle around us. She was afraid a little. She was a little afraid of. I think she was a little afraid of America, and a little afraid that American values would destroy us. I mean, they would, but she was a little very Italian still in a lot of ways, and so I think she was really frightened that we would be spoiled in some way, and she just couldn't help herself, I think. There's another poem I want to read, but of course now I can't find it. Oh, I've labeled 900 things, I've written down pages that I now can't find. Oh, so annoying. Wait a minute, I'm going to do this. Is one of the things I can't read small print anymore. In our house, nobody ever said. In our house, nobody ever said you're ugly. My sister was beautiful with her white skin, her full lips, her chocolate brown eyes, her straight teeth. She is to the right of me in the studio photo my mother bought from the photographer who traveled door to door in the Riverside section of Patterson. My brother is on the left, his wide dark eyes in his sweet face that looks solemn, self-contained, as he does now as a doctor for more than 40 years. In the middle, I stare into the camera, my hair a tangle of black curls, my lips formed into a shy smile. I know I am not beautiful. Only then I knew it. I look like I'm plugged into an electric socket, energy crackling off me as though I already have things I need to do and I can't wait. In our house, we all had a place. My brother engrossed in encyclopedias my mother bought on time from a door-to-door salesman. My sister off to play baseball with the boys on 25th Street, her body strong and athletic. but I always had a book in my hand, even at the dinner table. I, who found in books the life I wasn't brave enough to live, who found in language the beauty that lifted me out of the constraints of my world. When I announced at 17 that I want to be a poet, nobody said, you're insane. How will you earn a living? Instead, my mother, who sewed the linings and coats in the factories of Patterson, saved pennies every week until she had enough to buy me a pink Smith Corona portable typewriter in a pink case so I could be the writer I said I wanted to be. She still thought I was insane. I mean, you know, I was a working class kid. How was I planning to raise enough money to live on? It wasn't a very practical ambition, that's for sure. And I just want to find, I had a poem about a teacher, and I just cannot quite seem to find where it is. I know it's here somewhere. I did write down the time. I try to plan so carefully for reading, and then I lose, one of the poems always. No, just wait a minute. I will actually find it. I'm going to read, I can't find the one about my teacher, I'm sorry. But I will read, What Do I Know About Grief? It takes a long time to learn about grief, doesn't it? What do I know about grief, or how death would follow me like a determined lover, or how taking first my mother, father, sister, my best friend of 42 years, then my husband, more friends each year, how his bony finger would point at the next person. Once I walked into a spider web, and I think grief is like that, catching your hair and your lashes. My friend's husband died after a short and brutal illness. They were close as two spoons. When he died, she told me she had always been happy just to be in an apartment with him. Even in passing him in the hallway felt like an act of love. And the weeks after my husband died, in the months waterlogged with tears, I thought I would not survive. But I gradually began to imagine that he came back to visit me, a shadow in the corner of the room, a presence sit in a chair beside me, though of course he could never stay long. I'm comforted by his ghost self. I am sure he's telling me that he's content in that other world where I cannot touch them. I'm grateful there's a door through which he can pass to visit me, even for a moment, his ghost hand on my cheek. I just want to check. I'm going to finish with one poem from a book called The Silence in the Empty House, which has a lot of poems about him and about his death, and also about us as a young couple, and then about how I tried to cope after he died. You know, when you've lived with somebody for 47 years, it's very hard to do without them. And they seem very present in your life in some basic way. Anyway, when he was dying, his hands turned black at the tips. They were terrible to look at, terrifying. And it was the same time as the BP oil spill, which we kept seeing images of the birds covered in that black slick of oil. And the oil, the way the birds looked reminded me of his hands. So the only way I could really write about him when he was dying was to kind of mix it up with the pelicans who were dying and the other birds who were dying on the Gulf Coast. Watching the pelican die. On TV, I watched the pelican with its mouth wide open, its wings and body coated with oil. Is it screaming? I cannot hear the sound since this is a photograph. I don't know if it was caught in that mouth-stretched howl when it died, or if it's howling in recognition that it cannot survive the thick coat of oil that bears it down. Ladies who take care of you when I'm gone tell me you are having trouble. His hands, they say, his hands. When I come home, I see your hands have turned black at the tips and the ends of your fingers have been eaten away. I watch the dead bird on the Gulf floating on top of the water, its legs stiff and straight in the air, its body drained of all motion, all life. The next announcer on CNN says BP didn't want the photographer to take pictures of the dying birds covered as they are with the black slick of oil. They're hoping, he said, that the birds would sink and the evidence would be swallowed by the ocean. And late afternoon, I hear my daughter cry out. I rush to see what's happened, and you are stretched out in the bed, your body so thin, you look like a boy. You do not move. I call 911. The ambulance takes you to the hospital. BP is trying to put a cap on the spewing oil rig. The CEO keeps telling us it's no problem. Clumps of oil wash ashore and float on the surface of the water. The beach is littered with dead fish and birds. At the hospital, they want to know whether we want extraordinary measures. No, I say, he has a living will. We hover around you while they admit you. You have forgotten how to speak. Mostly you lie in bed, staring into a space above our heads. I reach out to hold your hand, stroke your forehead. Dennis, I call out, Dennis, you do not hear. The doctor comes in to see you. Well, he says, he should have been dead 5 years ago. What did you expect? You shouldn't have taken such good care of him. We did everything we could, the BP president tells us, looking directly at the camera. It's not such a calamity. We don't need to stop deep water drilling. Our economy will collapse if we do. The social worker tells us she put him in a nursing home. My brother tells me we kept him home all this time. If he gets a little stronger, I'll let him go home and he'll be around the things he knows. Another doctor arrives and says, he's not going to make it. The social worker admonishes us with her bag of common sense. She does not love you. We take you home. I sit next to you and hold your hand. The MSNBC reporter stands on the beach in a hurricane, picks up a huge glob of oil with a stick. Look, she says, look, and drips the oil on the white sand. She's shaking with fury over such destruction. Dead birds float by behind her. I'm in so much pain, you say. You have not complained before. We feed you a jar of baby applesauce. You open your mouth and accept the food. When I see the pelican on TV with its mouth wide open in horror, I remember you as you lay dying. On the Gulf, the earth and the sea are being destroyed, just as you were by the disease that finally destroyed you after you struggled against it for all those years. Some things are bigger than all of us. We cannot defeat them. If there is enough carelessness and greed in the world, even the ocean can be destroyed. And you who fought against this illness with such courage, even you cannot survive the back and tips of your fingers. They're all heavy on the bird's feathers, the bird's dead and floating on the surface, that gradually sink and disappear. I'm sorry, that last poem is not exactly an upbeat last poem. So I'm going to beg your forgiveness and read a poem that I write. There's another poem, a newer poem about a teacher, but I want to read this poem about oh, forget it. I seem to be having trouble finding these today. Anyway, you don't need to hear it. Just know that I'm a very optimistic person, despite the fact that I do have some sad poems. I think it's important to find the kernel of joy, even in the saddest things. And I try really hard to do that. Sometimes it's very difficult. But other times you can make yourself do it. If you broke your leg, my mother would say, It's in your mind. If you just think about it, you'll be able to pick yourself up and walk. She was an optimist, like you were very practical, but she thought that with your mind, you could control a lot of things. I've tried to live my life that way. So even with lots of broken bones to heal, I am going to Italy on Tuesday. My daughter thinks I'm absolutely out of my mind. But anyway, I am going. I'm going to read. I'm going to teach a workshop. I'm going to a day in Rome where they're doing a program on my work. And I'm going to go. I don't know how exactly, because I am kind of broken, but my daughter's here trying to help me and trying to help me pack. And I have health aids. So I'm doing it. You know, I don't know, crazy man, I am crazy. Yesterday I was thinking maybe I'm completely nuts, but anyway, whatever, I'm going. 2 planes, if you can imagine it. Anyway, thank you all for your patience and listening. Does anybody have any questions? How do you set this up?
Am I unmuted now?
Yep.
Oh, okay, you can hear me. I think, Pat, if you were to unmute everyone, if anyone had any questions for Maria, they could ask. That be okay?
Looks like she did that.
Yeah, I think we're,
Yeah, we're unmuted.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So do you have questions you'd like to ask? I'd be glad to answer them. Comments? Go ahead, honey.
I don't have a question, but I just want to thank you for your ability to turn parts of life that aren't easy into exquisite, poignant art.
Thank you, Donna. And you do the same thing, honey.
But this hour has just been so touching. And I've heard some of these poems, but some were new, and it's just always a pleasure to have puzzle pieces about who you are filled in. And so thank you. Thank you so much.
One of
Jennifer?
the things that, oh, I'm sorry. One of the things that Maria's poems have always said to me is, you know, especially the sadder poems, the poems about grief and loss, we're not alone. And I think that's one of the most important things poetry can do for us. It
Yeah.
teaches us that whatever we're going through, we're not going through it by ourselves. Other people have been there. And to me, that's what Maria's poetry does better than most others that I know. She's a straight shooter. She speaks from the heart and with intelligence. And I think that's what touches me the most about